What's going on, guys? So HTML and CSS are the fundamental building blocks of the web, and they're almost always the first thing that you learn when becoming a front-end or a full-stack web developer. So in this tutorial, we're going to be creating a simple professional website using HTML and CSS and also a little bit of JavaScript. And I'm going to take you from just having a Figma file, which is just the layout and the design, to a full-blown responsive web page. And we're also going to deploy it to Netlify. So the project itself is a bit advanced for beginners. However, I'm going to explain absolutely everything to the best of my abilities, and we'll talk about things like layout, why we're doing the things we are, naming conventions, and so on. So it'll be a relatively long project, so grab some tea or a cup of coffee, and let's build a website. Okay, so before we start coding, I just want to spend a couple minutes getting set up, talking about the project, showing you the project, etc. Now, this is actually a project from the iCodeThis.com website, which is a new daily coding challenge website run by my buddy Florin Pop. And it's full of UI challenges using HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, and I thought it would be a great place to find a project for this tutorial. Now, this is one of the larger projects, but if you're fairly new to web development, there's a ton of smaller UI-based projects that you can try out. There's free and paid challenges, and they have a fully functional in-browser IDE that's very similar to VS Code. So it's definitely something worth checking out. And if you do want to go with the Pro account, for a limited time, you can get 10% off using the code BRAD. So I'll have a link in the description to that. Now, this project is called the Growth Landing Page. It's a website for a SaaS, a software as a service company, and I thought it would be a good one because it's not super hard. Beginners can follow along, but it's also not super easy either. It's a good middle ground. And this is one of the pro projects, but I got permission from Florin to share the Figma file with you guys, so you'll have a link to that in the description if you want it, if you want to go in and slice up the images yourself. So you can see here I have Figma open. This is the Figma file, and if you want, you could click on the different layers. This is not a Figma tutorial, so I'm not going to get into it too much, but let's say you want to export this image right here, which looks like it's this right here. So what I could do is on this side, I could say export video. That's just what the layer is called. And if I do that, I can now have it just opened up in Photoshop, and now I have the image. So if you want, you can go through and slice up all the images, but I already have that done for you in the final code, which is in this GitHub repository, which you'll find the link to in the description. All right. I also have a blog post on my website that is the entire project. So all the code, just about everything we're going to do in this video. All right, now I just want to give you a quick demo of the project and the different sections that we'll be working on. So we're going to go section by section doing the HTML and CSS. We're going to save the responsiveness for the end. So basically we're building desktop first. We'll create the desktop version, then we'll go back in and we'll add some media queries so that we can make it look good on mobile devices. Now, we're already close to about 5 minutes into the video, so I'm just going to go through this really quick. So there's different sections we'll be working on one by one. We're going to start with the navbar, which just has a logo, some links, and I'll show you the responsive version after because we do have a hamburger menu with a hamburger button with a mobile menu. Then we have the main hero area with some headings, or a heading, some text, and buttons. And these you could do as inline images all separate, but I decided to just make it all one image and use it as the background image because there's nothing we actually have to interact with here. Then we have this video section, which is just some text, a thumbnail, and then a button. Then we have the testimonials. And we're going to be using a lot of utility classes, or creating a lot of utility classes for buttons and cards, text, and backgrounds, things like that. I really want to emphasize creating basically reusable CSS, especially for beginners, because I think that's really important when you're not using a framework that does it for you. So we have our testimonials, then we have our pricing cards here. So just some headings, a list, buttons. Then we have frequently asked questions, and this is where we're going to implement a little bit of JavaScript so that we can open and close the answers. And then at the bottom we have a decent looking footer, so we have a newsletter subscribe form, some links, and so on. All right, so as far as the responsive version, let's take a look at that. So I'll use the device icon here. So notice that now we have a hamburger menu, and now the menu opens from the side, okay, on smaller screens. And we have a different background image. It's the same images, but just formatted in a way that looks good on small screens. And then we have the video section, and then the testimonial cards. Everything is now stacked. For the testimonial cards and the pricing cards, we're using CSS Grid. So we'll do that. We'll also make it responsive. Everything looks nice and neat. And then we have our FAQ, still works and looks decent. Then we have the footer at the bottom. All right, so that's the complete website that we'll be building. We're not going to do the inner pages. If you do want to add those, you can. Once you have a base layout, it's pretty easy to add inner pages. So that's it. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I have my text editor. I'm using VS Code. I have it open with an empty folder just called SAS website. So you can use whatever text editor you want. I do recommend VS Code, but if you like something else, that's fine. So the first thing I want to do is get the assets for the project, which are the images. And there's a couple ways to do this. If you want to take the Figma file that's in the description and slice out the images yourself, you can do that. But I also have the final code where you can just use the images from there. So to show you real quick with Figma, if you open up the project, I already kind of showed you this with the video preview image. If you want to export that, you can just go to the layer, which is right here, and then click down here, export. Now for the main hero image, this one you can do a couple different ways. You could have these as separate inline images, but since there's nothing we have to interact with, these are basically just previews of the SAS of the product. So like this button isn't meant to be used or anything. So I would just say get this as one image and use that as a background image. And then get this one as well, because you can see this one is formatted for small screens. So get that for the mobile screens. And to do that, we could just click on this, the hero layer. And if we look in here, we have another layer called images, and this has a bunch of different parts, like the lines right there. That's one layer, that's another. So what I would do, and what I did do, is just click on images, the whole thing, come down here and export it. And then if I open that up and bring it over, you'll see it's just the entire thing. So that's what I did. If you want to, if you have more experience and you know how to use these as inline images, you could align them, but I just don't think it's needed, and it's more of a pain to do it that way. But everyone has their own preference. Now, if you don't want to do any of this or even open Figma, that's absolutely fine. Just go to the GitHub page here, and you can see I already have all the images for you. So if you're new to GitHub, you can either open your terminal and clone the repository. That might be a little advanced for you. So you can just download the zip file here. And if I open that up, you can see the images folder here with all the images. So what I'm going to do is in VS Code, I'm just going to create a new folder called images. And let's go ahead and just drag these over. Okay, and then I'll just go through them. So I have a favicon just for, for the tab, little logo. And then we have the hero images. We have the main BG, which I just showed you how to get in Figma. And then I also have the mobile version, which is more compact. Then we have for the logo, the regular logo with dark text for the navbar, and then a white one for the footer. Okay, then I just have a screenshot. That's really just for the README file in the repo. You don't even need this. And then the video preview image. So those are all the assets, all the images we need for this project. So next thing we're going to do is create our index.html file, and we might as well create our CSS folder. You don't have to put the CSS file in a separate folder because it's only one file, but I usually like to, even if it's just one file. So I'm going to call it style.css. You're welcome to call it something else if you want. And then we do have a little bit of JavaScript, so I'll create a JS folder, and in that we're going to create a main.js file, which we can close for now because we're not going to do any JavaScript till later. All right, so now we're ready to get started with the index HTML. So I'm going to use Emmet, which is a tool that's included with VS Code, and it allows us to just write quick HTML and CSS. So I'm going to just do exclamation enter, and that gives us our head body tags. And again, I know a lot of you guys know this stuff, most of you probably do, but just for the beginners that are, really new to this. So for the title, I'm just going to call it Growth App. And then let's include our other files. So we'll add a link tag here, rel equals style sheet, and the href is going to be css / and then our style CSS. And then the JavaScript file we can include down here at the bottom. Let's say script source, and that's going to be in the JS folder, and then main.js. Now there's a few other things that we're going to need to put up here in the head. One is going to be the font we're using, and if we look at the Figma file and I click on any of this text here, you'll see over on the side we're using the Poppins font. Okay, so that's what we want to use. So what we'll do is go to Google Fonts, and I'm going to, let me just clear this stuff up. You guys won't have that. Don't want that. All right, so we're going to search for Poppins, which is the font that we want to use. It's actually my favorite font. And just click on it, and then we want to select the different styles that we want to use. So I'm going to choose Light 300, which is this one here. I'm going to choose Regular 400, Semi-Bold 600, and Bold 700. Okay, so now all those are included in this one link tag. So I'm just going to copy that. You could also import it into your CSS if you want, but I'm going to take the link tag. We can close that up, and then let's put that in our HTML right above where we included the style sheet. Okay, and then I also want to use Font Awesome because we do have some icons. For instance, in the login button here, you can see the user icon. We have this laptop icon. So to include Font Awesome, you can go to cdnjs.com, at least this is how I do it, and then search for Font Awesome. So right here, version 6.4.2 at the moment, and if we click on this copy link tag, we can get the link that we want to include in our head. So I'll put that right here, and now we should be able to use Font Awesome icons. All right, now in the body for now, I'm just going to put an H1 with just hello. And you could just open your HTML file on your file system, but I would recommend, especially if you're using VS Code, I'd recommend using Live Server, which is a dev server that will automatically reload every time you save, so you don't have to keep refreshing. So if you go over to extensions and you just search for Live Server, so it's this one right here, so just go ahead and install it if you don't have it. All right, and then the only other extension I'd really recommend for this project is probably Prettier, which is a code formatter. So I have it so if I save, right, so if let's say this is way over here, if I save, it pops back into place and gets formatted. So I think that's turned on by default. If it's not, you can go to your settings. So if we go to settings and you search for format, let's see, right here, format on save. So you just want to make sure that's checked if you want that functionality. All right, so now if you want to open this with a live server, you can either click on this Go Live button down here, or you can right click and say Open with Live Server. And there we go. So this is going to be our project. And I'm going to keep it at about this width because, again, we're doing desktop first. We'll do the mobile stuff later on. And I think I can close, well, I'll just keep the Figma file open. Actually, we'll use that to go off of instead of the final website because that's more of a real life scenario. A lot of times when you're a front-end developer, you'll get handed a file like this, and it's your job to make it a website. All right. Actually, one more thing I want to put in the head is the favicon. So instead of just having the default globe icon here, we want to show our logo. So we'll do it right here. We'll say link, and let's say instead of rel style sheet, we're going to say rel shortcut icon. And I want to point to the images folder / favicon.ico, and then I'm just going to add a type of image / x-icon. Okay, so if we do that and we go back, you can see now we have the little icon here. All right, now we're going to do this top to bottom. So we're going to obviously start off with the nav bar, which is this area right here. And we're going to be using Flexbox to align it so that the logo is over here and the UL is over here. And then we'll use Flexbox to align the links as well. So let's go down to the body and let's get rid of that H1. We don't need that. And we're going to use an HTML5 semantic tag called nav. Again, I know most of you guys know this, but I'm just trying to explain everything. So on nav, we're going to have a class of navbar. We're going to use emit for that. So if you want to add a class, instead of typing it all out, div class equals navbar, you can just say dot and then whatever the class name and then enter. So now I have a class of navbar. Now inside that, we're going to want a class of container. So this is a utility class that we're going to use because we don't want the edge, we don't want the website to go all the way over. When we stretch the browser out really wide, we want it to end at a certain point. So we'll add the CSS for that in a minute, but that's what that's for. It's going to keep this contained so that our logo isn't going to go way over to the side when our browser is stretched out to 4,000 pixels. All right, so in the container, we're going to have a logo. So let's do a div with the class of logo, and then around the logo I'll have a link just to index HTML, and then we need our image tag. Oops. So image, and the source is going to be images / logo PNG, and for the alt we'll just say logo. All right, now in addition to the logo, so after that div, we're going to have our menu. So let's have a div with the class of main-menu. And inside that we'll have a UL. And then an LI, which will have the link. And this first one is going to be home, so I'll have it go to index HTML. We'll say home. Now the other LIs aren't actually going to go anywhere. So the A tag, I'll just leave that as a number sign. And for this, let's say about us. All right, and then I'm just going to copy this down twice. And then after about us, let's say blog. Now the last one is going to be our login link, which is going to be formatted as a button. So the A tag, we're going to have a class of BTN. So we're going to have a button class, which is like the base, and then we'll have other classes for different colors. This is going to be gray, so I'm going to call it BTN light. All right, and then inside the A tag here, we're going to be using Font Awesome. We're going to have that little user icon. So to get that, we can use an I tag with the class of FAS. So all icons will have a base class of FAS, and then let's say FAS-user, because that's the icon we want to use. And then after that I tag, we'll just say login. Okay, so we'll save that. Let me just, yeah, we'll do that. So it's going to look like crap at the moment, but we'll add our CSS in a few minutes. Now, I don't see the icon, so I'm sorry, it's FA user, not FAS user. There we go. So now you can see the icon. All right, so now we want to style the nav bar, but we also want to add just some base styles for like links and unordered lists. Like I don't want bullet points for any unordered lists, things like that. We need to apply the font, the Poppins font. So let's jump into our style.css, and I'm just going to close the sidebar here and make this a little smaller. I do want this to be desktop view, but I guess for now we can just kind of fit both in here. All right, so usually the first thing I add in my CSS is a little reset. So I'm going to add an asterisk, which just represents everything. And I want to set the box sizing on everything to border box. And what that does is it makes it so that when we add margin and padding, it doesn't affect the actual width and height of the element. It's contained inside of it. So this is something I pretty much always do. And then I also like to reset the margin to 0 and padding to 0 because some elements have default margin and padding. This way I know that we're starting from 0 with everything, so there's no surprises. And you'll see as soon as I save, the margin goes away, and now it's all squished together, but now I can add my own margin and padding where I need it. So let's add the body tag here, or body selector, and we're going to say font family. We want to set that to Poppins, which we already included, and sans serif. And then I'm going to set the font size to 16 pixels by default. And let's also set the line height. I'm going to set that to 1.5 and then set the background color of the body to white. All right, so now you can see that we're using the Poppins font. Now for links, let's say A. So for links, I'm going to take away the underline. So text decoration is going to be set to none. So you can see that takes it away. And then I'll set the color to just set the default color to 333, which is a really dark gray. And then for the unordered lists, I don't want to have any bullet points. So we'll set list style to none. And then another thing I like to do is for images, I like to set the max width by default to 100%. That way, if you put an image inside of a div that has a certain width on it, it doesn't break out of the div. It stays contained within it 100%. So that's really it for just the base selector styles. What I want to do now is, before we do the navbar, I want to just add the container class, because you can see in the HTML we have a container directly in the nav. That's so that it doesn't go all the way over to the side when when the browser is extended really wide. And we're going to have a container pretty much in every section that we create. So I'm going to come down here, and what I'll usually do is at the bottom I'll have a spot for utility classes, and we're going to have quite a few. And we're actually going to have two different sized containers, because if we look at the project here, so the container here for the navbar ends right here, for the hero ends here. The video section, however, is more narrow. And if we come down here, the pricing is more narrow, the frequently asked questions. So we'll have a container and then a container SM, or container small class, for those areas. All right, so let's go ahead and create a class of container. And for the regular container, I'm going to set a max width of 1100 pixels. And of course, this could be anything you want, but I think that's a good kind of default width for it. And then we want it to be in the middle, right? So we want to set the margin on that. We'll say top and bottom 0, but on the left and right, we want it to be auto, and that will put it in the middle. And then I just want some padding on the left and right as well, so it's not right up against the edges. So 0 top and bottom, and then let's do 15 pixels on the left and right. Now for the container small, I'm just going to grab this, and we're going to just change 1100 pixels to 800 pixels. Okay, and we'll have a class of container-SM for those other areas. So now that we've done that, if we save, you'll see that now there's a little bit of padding there, and if I stretch the browser out, it stops here rather than just staying, at the side. Okay, now let's do the navbar styles. So we're going to go up above where I put the utility classes, and let's put a comment of navbar. Okay, the navbar itself isn't going to really have much. I'm just going to add a background color. Let's say background of white, and then I'm just going to do padding 20 pixels. So I want to use Flexbox because I'm going to align the logo over to the left and then the menu over to the right. Now, we don't want to put display flex directly on the navbar, because if we look inside the navbar, the first child is the container. And what we want to align is the logo and the main menu. So we're going to put the Flexbox on container so that everything, all the direct children in container, which is the logo and the menu, are flex items that we can easily align. Now, if you don't know anything about Flexbox, I'd probably say pause the video and go watch my Flexbox crash course if you really want to understand it. Well, if you want to understand it better, I am going to explain it somewhat here as well, but I can't make this video, 8 hours long, so you might want to check that out as well. So let's go down here and let's grab the navbar and then the container that's in the navbar, and we're going to display the items inside of it as flex items. So if I save, right away they're going to go side by side because it's a row, it's a flex row. I could keep it a column by saying flex direction and set that to column, and that'll put it back, vertical, but I want it to be a horizontal row, so I'm not going to do that. Now I want the space, right? This remaining space on the line, I want to be in the middle of here, or between. So what we can do is say justify dash content, and we can set that to space dash between. And now that'll get pushed over to the side. So that aligns it going this way. Now, if I want to align them this way to be equal or to be in the center, then I could add align dash items and set that to center. Okay, now the menu, obviously, we don't want this to be vertical. We want this to go across in a row. So what I'm going to do is also make the UL a Flexbox. So if we make this UL a Flexbox, then all the LIs are flex items that we can align in a row. So let's say .navbar .main dash menu and then UL. Now, I just want to mention here, I'm not going to use main menu class on everything because some of the stuff I want the same style for the main menu as the mobile menu, which we haven't added yet. But the mobile menu will be vertical, so I don't want to apply this to the mobile menu. So that's why I'm specifying main menu. So let's say display flex, and right away they should go side by side. Now obviously they're too close to each other, so we want to style that. So let's grab the links. So I'll say navbar ul li and then the a tag. And notice I'm not using the main menu class because I also want this to apply to the mobile menu when we add it later. So what I want to do first here is add some spacing so everything's not squished together. So let's do 10 pixels top and bottom, 20 left and right. Okay, so that spreads it out. And then links are display inline by default. So I'm actually going to just change that to a block. And then let's set the font weight to semi-bold, so 600, and I'm going to add a transition of 0.5 seconds because when we hover over it and it changes color, I don't want it to just flick to that color. I want it to kind of smoothly fade into it. All right, so let's save that, and now you can see these are bold. The next thing I want to do is the hover, so let's go right under here. Actually, we can just grab that, and we're just going to say a:hover. And then I will just want to change the text color to, what's the color that we're going to use here? It's that light blue, which is 489, hexadecimal 4891FF. Okay, so now if I hover over, you can see it turns blue and it kind of fades into it. It doesn't just flick into it like right away. That's because we added that transition. Now we've come to a point where we're going to start using this color quite a bit. So we're going to have buttons with it and stuff like that. So instead of having to use this hexadecimal value in a bunch of different places, I'm going to create a custom property or a variable within CSS that has this number or this color. So I'm going to cut it here, and then I'm going to go up to the top. I usually like to put this right here under the reset, And when we create a custom property or a variable, we put it in a scope, and we're going to say :root for the scope. That way we can use this anywhere. And then when we define our variables, they have to start with a double hyphen. So I'm going to call it primary color, and I'm going to paste that in. And now to use this variable, I can come down where I cut it, and we need to use the var keyword here, and then just put in the variable name, which is primary color. And now if I come over here, I should see the same blue. All right. Now there's a couple other colors I just want to add real quick. So we're going to have a light color as well, which is going to be F4, F4, F6. And then we're going to have a dark color, which is going to be 111, which is just like a really dark gray. All right, so we can use those later on. Okay, so now that we have the hover effect, let's see, what do we want to do next? Let's start to work on the button, right? We want this last login to look like a button. So if we look at the project here, okay, so we want it like that. This doesn't have the icon, I added that, but as you can see, it has the gray background. So what we'll do is if we look at the HTML, we have a class of BTN and BTN Lite. So I'm doing this like the Bootstrap classes, if you're familiar with Bootstrap. You have a base BTN class, and then you have different color classes that you can use in addition to that. So button classes are a utility, so let's come down here and let's say buttons, and we'll go ahead and add our base BTN class. So I'm going to add, actually let's do display inline block, because links are inline by default. We want it to be inline block. Padding, we'll do 13 pixels top and bottom and 20 pixels left and right. Now for the background, it's up to you on how you want your default BTN class as far as the color goes. I think what I'm going to do is use the light color. I think that makes the most sense. So we'll say var light color like that, and if I save, now we have the gray background. Now since I'm doing this, we don't really need the BTN light class. You could create it if you want, just if you want to always have to specify a color like this, but I think I'm just going to get rid of it. So I'm kind of just thinking about stuff as I go here that I might change. So yeah, we'll just do that. And then for the color, let's say 333, so really dark gray. Font weight of the button, we'll do semi-bold, 600. And let's make sure text decoration is none. And border should be none. And border radius, I do want it to have rounded corners, so we'll do 10 pixels on that. And then the cursor should always be a pointer. And then we'll also add a transition of 0.5 seconds just for any hover effects. Okay, so if I hover over it, the text is still changing to blue here. That's only because we specified that in the navbar. Now on just the regular hover, if it wasn't in the navbar, all I want to do is lighten the background color a little bit. So we can say button hover, and then let's just change the opacity to 0.8. So we'll change it from 1, which is the default, to 0.8. So you can see the background gets a little bit lighter. And we'll just do that for all the colors of the buttons. Now while we're down here, let's add the other colors. So we'll do BTN-primary. So for that, that'll have a background of the whatever the primary color is. All right, and let's see. Yeah, we'll make the color white. I mean, you might have to change that if your primary color is a light color, but we'll just do that for now. And then I also want to have a button dark. So let's say BTN-dark, and we'll do background is going to be whatever the dark color is, and color of the text will be white. All right, so now if I were to go to my index HTML and add on to this btn-primary, it turns blue. If I want btn dark, it turns dark. All right, so I'm just going to keep it as just regular btn, or if you wanted to add btn light, that's also fine. So let's see, the last button class that I want to create is button block. And this is if we want it to be block level and go all the way across, like a width of 100%. So let's do that. Let's say display as a block as opposed to inline block, and then width of 100%. All right, so now we have a couple more things to do with this login. So one, since we have the background here, I want to add a little bit more space in between here, because see, there's a lot more here than here. So what we can do is go up back to where our navbar stuff is, and instead of putting a class on that li, that last li, I'm going to use a pseudo selector called last child. So let's say navbar ul li and then colon last child. So that will target that last one, and then I want the a tag in that last child, that last li. And I'm going to add margin, what do we want? Margin left, right? Of 10 pixels. Save that, and now we have a little bit more space in here. Now, the icon is a little too close to the text for my taste, so I think what I'm going to do is just say navbar ul, and then any li that has an icon, or any link that has an icon in it, let's add some margin to that icon. So margin right. There we go. So that pushes it over a little bit. Okay, so I think that's good for the navbar. And like I said, we'll do the responsiveness later. Right now, I mean, if you look at this on a mobile phone, it's not going to look very good, but we'll get to that later. We're just doing the desktop first. So let's move on to the hero section, which if we look at the landing page here, is going to have a header or a large heading, some other text, a primary button, a light button or regular button with an icon, and then this background image. All right, so let's work on that. So we're going to add the HTML first, which isn't really that much. So let's go right here. Put a comment here of hero, and what I like to do, and if you've ever watched any of my HTML CSS tutorials, I like to use section. So the section HTML5 tag I use for just about everything except for headers and footers and navs. So we're going to use section, and I'm going to give it a class of hero. Okay, now we want a container in the section because we don't want it, going out to the sides when we stretch the browser out really wide. So let's say container. And then in that container, we're going to have our hero-content, and that's going to include the, the text and the buttons. So first we have the heading, which I'm going to give an h1, and let's give it a class of hero-heading. And for text sizes, we're going to have some utility classes. So this one is going to be text-XXL. Okay, so extra, extra large. And let's add the text in here. We'll say a powerful solution to grow your startup fast. And then let's add underneath that a paragraph. And this one will have a class of hero text. And then I'm just going to copy the text, paste that in there. All right, so if I save it, it's just going to look like this right now. So we have a lot to do to it. Underneath the paragraph, we're going to have our buttons. So I'm going to have a div with the class of hero-buttons. And the first one, I mean, they're links, but they're going to be formatted as buttons. So we'll have BTN, but I also want to make it blue, so BTN primary. And it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to say get started for the text. Oops. get started. And then let's see, we'll just copy that down, and this one's going to be gray, so we can actually just do BTN. And then we'll change the text here to, let's change that to book a demo, and we're going to have an icon here. So it'll be an I tag with FAS and then FA-laptop. Okay, let's save it, take a look. Okay, so buttons look good. Now we need to do some styling here, so let's go to Style CSS. And we'll do this, actually before we do the hero stuff, let's do the text utility classes. So we have our buttons underneath that. Let's say text classes. Okay, so we're basically going to have a bunch of different sizing classes. So text-XXL. I'm going to set the font size. I'm going to use rem units here, so they're going to be relative to the root font size. So our root font size is 16 pixels, right? That's the font size, the default font size. So 1 rem is going to be 16 pixels. 2 rem would be 32. Okay, so it's going to be 16 times 2. 3 rem would be 16 times 3, etc. So I'm going to do 3 rem for the large, this is the largest text. And let's set a line height. I'm going to set that to 1.2. And then the font weight, I'm going to set that to 600. And then we're going to add some margin onto our text classes as well. Let's do 40 pixels top, 0, 20 pixels bottom. Okay, so if I save that, there we go. So we have a very large heading. And while we're at it, let's add the other text sizes. So I'm just going to copy that, and then let's do text extra large. Extra large, I'm going to do, instead of 3 rem, let's do 2.2. Line height, I'll do 1.4. Font weight, we'll do normal. And margin, we'll keep the same. Okay, let's go underneath that. So in addition to XXL and XL, we're going to have LG, which is large. And for that, we're going to do 1.8 rem. For the line height, 1.4. Font weight will be normal. Padding, let's do 30 pixels for the top. Okay, and I'm just going to copy that one. Okay, so the last one, actually we're going to have 2 more. Medium, this is going to be medium, so MD. Font size for this, let's do 1.2. Line height's good, that's good. We'll do 20 on the top instead of 30. And let's do 10 on the bottom. Because generally the larger your heading is, the more space you're going to want around it. And then the last one is going to be small. So text SM, and for that let's do small, we'll do 0.9, and then line height 1.4, that's good. For the bottom we'll do 5, for the top we'll do 10. Okay, and then I also want to have a class to center the text, so we'll call this text center. And set that to text align center. Okay, and that should do it for our text classes. Now let's go back up and let's do our hero. So under the navbar, because I like to keep all the utility classes at the bottom. So here we're going to do our hero. All right, so the hero itself isn't going to have much on it. The reason for that is if we look at this, the background image, I don't want to put on the hero because the hero class itself extends all the way over. The container is what keeps it in here, and I want the background image to be the background of the container. Otherwise, it's going to spread all the way across. So on the hero class itself, all I'm going to have is a margin bottom of 50 pixels. And you could create utility classes for margin and padding, like, you know, M-2 or MY or MX-3, things like that. But that you start to get into like creating your own framework then, which is fine, but I don't want to do that for this project. We'll just add spacing to the actual elements directly. All right, now the hero container. Let's do hero and then container. So this is, again, this is where we want the background image. So I'm going to say background. We're going to set that to a URL. And the URL is going to be .. or the path is going to be .. images / hero-bg.png. And we want that to be no repeat. And then let's add a background -size. And I want it contained. So we're going to use contained. And then the position. So background -position. I want it to be centered and bottom. We want to push it down all the way to the bottom. And then the height of the container, I'm going to set that to 550 so that we can see the whole image. So if we come over here, now you can see we have the background image. And again, it's not going to look good. I mean, I don't think that that looks very good because it's just too wide for a small screen. That's why we're using a different image for the mobile. But that looks good for now. However, up here we have to fix some stuff, right? Because the buttons are too close to the text. This is just too wide. I want to shorten it up. If we look at the Figma file, everything is over. This goes over about 70% or so, right? And then we have spacing in here. So that's what we want to do. So let's go under the container here, hero container, and let's say hero and then hero-content, which wraps everything. And I'm going to set a width of that to 70%. Okay, so it stops about here. Now the text, I want this text to be even shorter. If we look here, the text is probably about 70% of that 70%. So let's do that. Let's say hero and then hero-text. And we'll set that width to 70%. And then I'm also going to add margin bottom to push the buttons down. We'll do 20 pixels. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And I think aside from the, responsiveness, I think we're done with the hero section. So next we're going to do the video section, which is pretty simple. We just have, a heading, this image, and button. We're going to give it a black background. So let's do that next. We're going to jump into our HTML. Let's come back down here, and I'm going to let's put a comment in here. So this is the video section, and we're going to use a section tag. Let's give it a class of video. Now I'm going to have some background utility classes as well. This one is going to be BG black. And I'm not calling it BG dark because I'm also going to have a BG dark with our dark color, which is 111, which is almost black, but not quite. But this one will be completely black. So the video has a smaller container. And remember, we created that container-sm class, which was only 800 pixels wide. So we're going to use that here. And then for the text, we'll do an H2. I'm going to give it a class of video-heading, and we'll use our text XL utility class and our text center utility class. And we're going to say see how it works and get started in less than 2 minutes. Okay, so if you save that, we're not going to see the black background yet, obviously, because we haven't created it. But let's finish the HTML first. So underneath the, let's see, we have our H2. Underneath that, let's have a video-content div. And we're going to have our image, but I want a link wrapped around it because ultimately it would either lead you to another video page or open a modal or something like that. So the image, let's see, the image is going to go to images/video preview PNG. I'll just say video for the alt. And then I'm going to give this a class, this image tag. Let's give that a class of video-preview. Okay, and then underneath that link, that image with the link, we're going to have a button. Well, it's an A tag formatted as btn-primary, and that will say get started. Okay, let's save it. All right, so there's not too much that we have to do here, but let's come back to our style sheet. And before we do the background utility classes, let's just do the video stuff because it's not much. So under hero, we'll do our video section. So the video class itself is just going to have some padding. So we're going to do 10 pixels, top, 0, and then 40 pixels. And then I'm just going to make the video content, which is just the image and the button. I'll display that as a flex box, but as a column, so it'll go vertical. So let's say video dash content. So if I do display flex, automatically it'll go side by side, but as I showed you earlier, if I change the flex direction to column, then they'll be on top of each other, right? Now, I don't want this button to be spread all the way across like that. So what I'm going to do is align items to the center, and yeah, so align items to center, and then I think that's really it, right? We should probably add some margin here. So let's grab the video preview, which is the image. So video dash preview, and let's say margin bottom 20 pixels. Okay, give us some space for that button. Now we want this to have a black background, so this is where we're going to add our background utility classes. So let's go down to the bottom here under the text, and let's say background. So we'll have BG, let's start with BG primary, and this time the background is going to have the primary color. So var primary color, and the text color will be white. All right, and then we'll just copy that. Oops. So that, and then we'll have BG light. Change that to light. Change the color to 333. Okay, then we're going to have BG dark. That'll be the dark color. And then finally we'll have BG black, which is the one that we use for the video section. And for that, we're just going to hard code black. All right, and there we go. So pretty simple. I think that looks pretty good. So next thing we want to do underneath that is the testimonials. Now, I actually don't want to have black for the background. I want this to be the dark color. I think it's a nice contrast rather than this all be black. But I mean, everyone has a different eye, so if you want to keep it black, if you want to make it primary, whatever you want to do is absolutely fine. But let's add the HTML first. So let's see, we're going to go under the video section, and let's say testimonials. We'll add a section tag with the class of testimonials, and let's do BG-dark this time. We're going to have our container, regular container, and then let's see, we'll have our heading, right? Because before the testimonials, we have this text right here, which I'm actually going to copy that real quick. Okay, and then we'll use an H3 here, and let's say testimonials dash heading, and then for the size, let's use our text XL. See, it's nice to have these utility classes that you can just reuse. Big fan of that. All right, so if I save this, take a look down here. Now this spacing that you see is from the heading, because remember, these headings or these text classes have margin on the top and bottom. So what we'll do is just add some padding to the testimonials class, right? In fact, we can do that right now. Let's go up here under the videos, testimonials, and let's say for the testimonials class, we're going to add padding of 40 pixels on the top and bottom. So now we won't see that space because that padding, took that space. So the text here, we might as well just do the CSS for the heading as well, because after that we're going to have our grid of cards. So let's say testimonials, then we'll say testimonials dash heading. So I'm going to set the width to that. We don't want it to go all the way across. So let's set it to 700 pixels. Let's also add a margin bottom of 40 pixels. Okay, so that's our heading. Now we're going to do the cards, which are going to be inside of a grid. We're going to use CSS Grid for this. So under the H3, we'll have our grid wrapper, which is going to be called testimonials-grid. And in that grid, we'll have a class of cards. So each one will be wrapped in a card. And in that card, we'll have a paragraph. And I'm just going to grab the text for this one. Okay, so we'll have a paragraph, and then underneath that, we'll have another paragraph with the name. So Catherine Smith, and then we'll have another paragraph under that with the, I guess the company name. I don't even know what this says. Capodopera? Not sure what that is. It must be the company name. So that's one, right? If I save it, it's just going to look like this right now because we haven't styled the card or anything in it. But what I'll do is grab the other two cards and paste those in. So underneath this one, which ends right here, I'll paste in two more. So we have 3 cards. So if I save that, it should look like that so far. So now let's do the style of the card itself, which is a utility, because we can use that in other places. We are going to use that in other places. So let's come down here to the bottom. Let's say card. So initially the background will be white, but of course you can change that. You can simply add a BG class to it. Color, we'll set that to black. Border, radius, I'm going to make that 10 pixels, so rounded corners, and we want a little bit of padding, so 20 pixels. All right, so that'll be our card class. Now, since we're going to be using CSS Grid, there's a couple of things we have to do. So up where we have testimonials, let's add our testimonials-grid. So CSS Grid, and I do have a crash course on that as well if you want to watch that, but it's similar to Flexbox, right? The way we use it, we say display. Instead of flex, we say grid. Now, if I do that, it doesn't do anything yet. If you say display flex, right, just to show you, it automatically puts them in a row. But if I do grid, it doesn't, because we need to add one more thing, and that's the grid template columns. So we're going to say grid dash template dash columns. And the way this works is we set the value for each column. So let's say I wanted to do 100 pixel for the first, 100 pixel for the second, 200 pixels for the third. Save that, and that's what I get, right? This is 100, 100, and 200. Now I want these to go all the way across, and I want them to be even. So instead of using pixels, I'm going to use what's called a fraction, an FR unit. So I'm going to say 1 FR, 1 FR, 1 FR. Do that, and now they're even all the way across. Now instead of doing this 3 times, we can actually use repeat, and we can say I want to repeat 3 times 1 FR, and that gives me the same thing. Now we need some spacing, and instead of just adding margin like we would with Flexbox, we actually have a property called gap, or grid gap you can also use. So that I'm going to set to 30 pixels. If I do that, then it puts 30 pixels for the gap. So incredibly easy to align stuff. And CSS Grid is two-dimensional, so you can have columns expanding, and you can do all kinds of stuff. This is something that's very easy, and you could do with Flexbox, but I did want to just use CSS Grid somewhere in here. All right, so let's, I think that's pretty good. I do want to move, see how the name is moved. There's some spacing between the text and the name. We want to do that. We also want to make the name bold. So what we can do is grab the, let's see, so we have, let me just go back to the HTML real quick. So we have 3 paragraphs, right? Let's grab the second paragraph using a pseudo class or a pseudo selector. So we can say testimonials, and then inside the card we're going to say paragraph, and instead of last child or first child, because we don't want the first or last, we want the middle or the second, we can use nth dash child, and then whatever number we want we can put in here, and I want the second. So that'll give me the second paragraph, and I'll put a margin top of 30 pixels, and then we'll make the font weight bold. Save that, and there we go. So now it's pushed it down, margin top, and made it bold. Okay, so that's all set. Now we have the pricing cards. So we have a heading, subheading, and then 2 cards with a bunch of content. So let's do that next. We're going to go to our HTML, come down here, say pricing section, and we're going to give that a class of pricing. And we're going to use the small container here, so container-sm. And let's have an H3. We'll say pricing-heading. And let's, for the size, we'll do text-XL, and let's do text-center. And we'll just say pricing here. Then we're going to have the subheading. I'll make that a paragraph. Give it a class of pricing-subheading, and let's do, for the size, text medium, and let's do text-center. And I'm just going to grab that text. All right, so if I save that, we should see this. Now we're going to do the same thing we did with the testimonial grid. So underneath that subheading, let's do a class or a div with the class of pricing-grid. And in here, I'm just going to put a comment and say pricing card 1. Okay, so we're going to use the card class again. We're going to use BG light. So this first one is going to have a gray background, light gray. And then each card is going to have a pricing, let's say pricing-card-heading or header. And then in the header, we're going to have, let's take a look real quick here. We're going to have the heading and the card heading and the card subheading. So inside here, we'll use an H4, and let's give it a class of pricing-heading. And actually, let's also add text-XL for that. And this one is simple. And then underneath the H4, we'll do our pricing-card-subheading. Okay, and I'll just grab that text. Okay, so that's the subheading. Now underneath that, if we look here, we're going to have this line, which is going to be the price. So this one's free, this one's 49. And this text is bigger than this text, so what we'll do is wrap this in a span so that we can style it separately. So underneath the subheading, let's say, do another paragraph with pricing card dash price, and then we're going to have a span in here, and we can use our text XL here. And let's say free, and then outside of the span, but still within that paragraph, we'll put asterisk, no credit card needed. Okay, and then underneath that, let's see, or let's go underneath the header, right? The header ends right here. So that will be the body. So class of pricing dash card dash body. So you can see the convention that I'm using here. So in the body, we're going to have our unordered list, and each list item is going to have a check icon. So we'll use an I tag and then FAS and FA-check for the icon, and then some text, so real-time monitoring. All right, and I'm just going to grab the rest of the LIs. Okay, so LIs with the checks. And then underneath the unordered list, the last thing we want in the card is the link, the get started link. So it'll be an A tag with BTN, BTN dash primary, and BTN block. So this is I believe the first time we're using BTN block because we want it to go all the way across the button. And that'll say get started. All right, so let's save that. We'll check it out. Okay, doesn't look very good, but we'll fix that. I think what I'm going to do is just paste in pricing card 2 because it's the same exact thing except it's different content, different texts, same classes and all that, except for the background, which is black. So underneath pricing card 1, which ends right here, I'll paste in pricing card 2. And again, same thing except it has BG black instead of BG light. All right, so let's see, it's not black though. So this has to do with CSS specificity. What I'm going to do is actually take the card, and I actually wanted this up above anyways. So we're going to take the card and put that up above the background classes. I want the background to be at the very bottom. So we'll put this under the containers. So we have containers, paste that in, that card in right there, and now that takes precedence. So now we have our light and our dark cards. So now we have some styling to do within the pricing cards. So let me just make sure. Let's see, is there anything after that? Yeah, we have just this text right here. I'm not going to add the view features link, but I will put this text. So I'll just grab that. And let's put it below, let's see. This is the container, that's where the container is. So right above the last div, we'll put a paragraph, let's say pricing dash footer, and we'll give it our class of text center, and then paste that in. All right, now we're going to go up here where we're going to style our pricing stuff. Now there's not much to do on the pricing class itself. So let's do the grid. So pricing dash grid, and obviously this grid only has 2 columns. So what we can do is say display grid, and then we want to add grid template columns, and we're going to say repeat twice 1 FR. So if I save that, now we have 2 side by side. Let's add a little margin on the top to keep it away from that text. So margin top, we'll do 50 pixels, and then let's also add a gap of 30 pixels. Okay, so that looks good. Now we just basically want to style the stuff inside of the card because everything looks pretty, smushed together. So underneath the grid, let's say pricing and pricing dash, dot pricing card. Let's get the subheading. And notice that I'm prefixing this with pricing, and that's just I prefer to do that, so I'm going to do that here as well. So I should be doing this everywhere, even for like testimonial grid. To me, it's just good practice, like even with this stuff, video, just to better target everything. Hero, that's good, that's good. Yeah, so the rest of that's good. So I'm just going to prefix everything with that pricing class. So for the subheading, I'm just going to add margin bottom, 30 pixels. And then let's see, we have, yeah, so this looks good, the heading and the subheading. Now let's do this right here, which is the, what is it, pricing card pricing. Or what is it, price. Okay, so we'll do margin bottom 30 pixels on that. Padding, we're going to do 20 top and bottom. And then I'm also going to have a border on the bottom, 1 pixel solid, and CCC, which is light gray. Okay, that looks good. For the UL, let's do that next. So we have pricing UL. Yeah, UL. We're going to do margin 30 on the top and bottom for that. And then for the LIs, pricing for the LIs, let's do margin bottom 20. Space those out a little bit. The icon, the check is too close to the text, so we can say pricing UL LI I tag margin right 10 pixels. Fix that. And then let's see. So we have the button here, but the text isn't aligned. So let's actually go into our utilities, our buttons, and make sure that we align on the BTN. We want the text aligned centered. So buttons should always be centered. All right, so that looks pretty good. For the footer, this text right here, we just want to add some space there as well. So let's go right here and say pricing dash footer. And we're just going to do margin 30 pixels on the top and bottom. Okay, so far so good. Now we're going to get into the FAQ, which we're actually going to be adding a little bit of JavaScript to as well. So we'll start off with the HTML, then we'll do the CSS, and then we'll do the JavaScript. So let's go out to our HTML. Let's go under the pricing section and add FAQ. So section FAQ, and let's do BG light for the background. We're going to be using the container small for this. And then for the text, let's do an H3, or for the heading rather, we'll do an H3 with text XL and text center. And we'll say frequently asked questions. That blue squiggly line that you see sometimes is just my spell checker, so just ignore that. Let's see, so underneath the H3, we're going to have this menu thing. We're not going to make it function, like we don't have categories or anything like that, but we will create it and style it. So underneath that H3, let's make it a UL, and let's call it FAQ-menu for the class. And then we'll have an LI, and I'm going to have an active class because, as you can see in the mock-up here, it has a blue background. So we'll make that the class of active. We'll say all, and then we'll have another one getting started. Then we'll have another one, which is pricing. So that's our menu. Underneath that, we're going to have our FAQ content. So I'm going to wrap everything in a class called FAQ content. Okay, and then each one of these with the question and answer, so this right here, each one is going to be a group. So I'm going to call it FAQ group for the class for each one. So let's say FAQ-group. And then in each group, we're going to have a group header. So let's say group or FAQ-group-header. And in that header is going to be the question. So I'm going to put that in an H4. We'll do text MD for the font size. And then I'll grab the first question. Okay, and then underneath that H4, I'm going to have the icon for the plus or minus sign. And I want the first one to be shown like it is here, although in this mock-up it has an X. We're going to use a minus sign. So let's put an icon here, FAS, FA-minus, like that. And this isn't going to look very good at first. We're going to have to position it and all that. Then underneath the group header, which ends right here, is going to be the group body, which is where the answer is going to be. So let's say FAQ-group-body. And the way that this is going to work is whichever one is open is going to have a class of open. And we want the first one to show. So we want the first one to be open. So I'm going to manually put the open class on there. And then what we'll do is with our JavaScript, we'll make it so that when we click on one of these, it'll add that class of open dynamically. But for the first one, it'll have that open class. All right, now in here, I'm just going to grab a paragraph, which is the answer. Okay, and if we take a look at it, yeah, I mean, it's not going to look very good, but let's just finish the HTML. So instead of typing out every group, I'm going to paste them in. If you want, you can go to the GitHub repo and you can grab the code. Basically, it's going to just be, what, 4 or 5 more of these, this group right here. So let me just grab those. Let's see, so 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so 5 more of those. All right, so right under this group, I'm going to paste in just a bunch of other groups. It's all the same. The only difference between these and the first one is there's no open class on the body. And of course, the text is different. So if I save that, you can see we have all of our headers and groups with a group header and a group body and an icon. So now we want to start to style this. So let's go to our CSS. Let's go under pricing. We'll say FAQ, and for the FAQ class itself, all I'm going to really have is padding on the top and bottom. Then we have our group, so FAQ-group. And let's see, for the group, I'm going to have a border-bottom to kind of separate them out. So we'll do 1 pixel solid, and let's do CCC for the color, and then padding bottom of 20 pixels. Okay, so that kind of separates them out. Then for the header, let's do that. So we have, and I'm going to prefix this with FAQ. So then we'll do FAQ dash, I guess we could do group, and then FAQ dash header, or it's group header. And what we want to do here is make the border, actually, wait a minute. No, we don't want it. There's no border. We don't want that. We want to add some padding. So we'll do 20 pixels top and bottom, and some margin on the bottom, 15. And then we want to position this relative. So the reason I'm doing this is because the icon, right, the plus or minus sign, we have to position that absolute within the group header. And in order to do that, we need to make the group header position relative. And the reason we want to position the icon absolute is so we can say exactly where we want it. You know, 10 pixels from the top, 10 from the left, or whatever we're going to do. All right, so you want to make sure position relative is on that header. So before we do the icon, let's do the actual text, the H4, that's in the header. So I'll just grab this and then H4, and I'm just going to make the font weight 600, and I'm going to set the width to 95% because I don't want it to run into the icon. So it's just going to be a little shorter. All right, now for the icon, let's take that, put an I there, and then we're going to, like I said, position this to be absolute. Okay. Now I don't want it positioned here. I want it to be over here at the top right. So what we'll do is say from the right, let's go 0 from the right. So it'll be all the way over. And then from the top, let's bring it down 35 pixels. Save that, and now you can see it's positioned all the way to the right and it's pushed down 35 pixels. So I'm also going to just make the font size 1.1 rem. Actually, let's do 1.5 rem. Just make it a little bigger, a little smaller, 1.3. And then I'm also going to make the cursor into a pointer when we hover over it. All right, cool. Now for the body, we obviously don't want this to show by default. So what we're going to do is, let's say FAQ and then FAQ dash group. Whoops. FAQ group, and then what is it? FAQ dash, is it group body? Yeah, group body. And we don't want this to show, right? So I'm going to say display none. As soon as I do that, all the bodies are gone. And we'll style this after, this menu right here. So now all the bodies are gone, but if it has the class of open, then it should show. So what we can do is grab this and say if it has the class of open, so dot open, don't put a space here. That means you're looking for an element inside of it with the class of open. We want to see if the actual body has a class of open. And if it does, then we want to display block instead of none. So if I save that, we should see the first one because that has a class of open. We manually put it on there. So hopefully that makes sense. Now for the menu, let's do that real quick. So FAQ and then FAQ, actually, yeah, we'll do ul.faq menu. So let's set a max width of, let's say, 400 pixels. And let's see, we want it in the middle. Let's say margin auto, and let's display it as a flex box. Okay, and just so you can see what I'm doing here, let me make this a little smaller. All right, so display the flex. Now the remaining space we want to put in between. So let's say justify content. That's going to be space dash between. Okay, and then let's align items to the center, and let's set a background. Let's do DDD. Yeah. And then for padding, we want some spacing in there. Let's do 10 pixels top, 20 pixels, or top bottom, 20 pixels left right. Border radius. Border radius is going to be 10. And then font weight is going to be 600. All right, cool. And yeah, we want that to have a pointer. So let's say cursor pointer. And then for the active one, actually before we do that, we just want to style the list items. So I'm going to grab that, li, say padding 10 pixels, 20 pixels, border dash radius will be 5 pixels, and text align center. Okay, now the active one, we want it to have the primary color, so what we can do is say FAQ, dot FAQ, UL, and then FAQ dash menu, and then li dot active. So if it has the class of active, then let's set the background to be the primary color. All right, and we'll change the text color to white. There we go. Okay, so that's the CSS. Now we're going to jump into the JavaScript because we want to be able to click on one of these headers, either the icon here or the header, and we want it to show that answer for that question, or the body for that question. So let's go into our main.js, and again, this is not a JavaScript tutorial. I don't expect you to really 100% understand everything I'm about to do. I will explain it as I move along, but again, it's not a JavaScript tutorial, so I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it. So let's put a comment here. We'll say FAQ accordion, because we're also going to add some JavaScript for the mobile menu in a little bit. So what I'm going to do here is take the document object, because we're working in the document object model, and the document contains, well, everything in the document. All of our paragraphs, headings, the body tag, all that stuff is within the document. And there's also certain methods or functions on this document object. So what I want to do is call add event listener. And it's going to do just that. It's going to listen for whatever specific event that I put in here. And I'm going to listen for DOM content loaded. So I'm going to wait for the DOM or the page to load. And then once that happens, I'm going to run a function so I can pass that in as a second parameter. So you can do it like that, or you can do an arrow function, which is a little shorter. So inside here, once the content is loaded, I'm going to grab the FAQ container, or the FAQ content. And that's going to be, let's see, this div right here with the class of FA content. So I'm going to create a variable here. I'm using const because I'm not going to reassign it. It's constant. So let's say FAQ container, and we're going to set that to document, and we're going to use a method called query selector. And just like we can with CSS, we can select items using the class or ID or just the selector, whatever we want. So I'm going to use the class of FAQ-content because that wraps everything. Then what I want to do is add a click event listener onto that FAQ container. So let's say FAQ container.add event listener, and we're going to listen for a click, and then when that happens, we're going to run a function, and for now, I'll just do an alert of 1. So now if we come back over here and I click anywhere in the FAQ content class, or the div with that class, I get an alert 1. Now there's a few ways to do this. We could have added a click event or a click event listener onto every header, but this is a little more efficient, and this is using something called event delegation, where instead of putting an event listener on each one, we put an event listener on a parent element, which is this container, and then we figure out what are we actually clicking on. Okay, so instead of this alert 1, let's get rid of that, and we can actually pass an event object into this function, and if we do a console log of e.target, let's come over here, let's open up the console, and I'll click on this right here, and you can see we get the H4, we get this here. So e.target simply gives me whatever I click on. If I click on this, we get the paragraph, which is in the body. Okay, if I click on the icon, that's what we get. So e.target is just whatever we click on. So what I want to do is create a variable here called group header and set that to e.target, and I want to get the closest header, the closest div with the class of FAQ group header. So we can use a method called closest, and then we can put the class in here that we want, which is going to be FAQ-group-header. Okay, and we can do a console log of group header. So now if I click here, you can see we get this one. And the header contains both the H4 and the icon. If I click here, I get that one. Now, if I click on a body, you see it says null, right? So what I'm going to do is we'll get rid of the console log. Actually, I'll keep it for now, and right above it, I'm going to say if not group header, then I just want to return. I don't want to do anything. So now if I click on the header, we can see it. If I click on the body, nothing happens because we don't want anything to happen. We just want to be able to click on the header, meaning that this or the icon, and then show the body. All right, so it's only going to do something if we click on the header now. So I'm going to get the group itself, and we can do that by taking the group header, right? So if we say group header, we can use a property called parent element, and it does just that. If we look at our HTML, each group header has a parent of the group, FAQ group. So that's how we can bring that into our JavaScript. We also want to get the group body, so let's say const group body, and we can get that by saying group, so the group we just created above or selected above, and then we can use query selector, and we're going to select the body, so the class of FAQ group dash body, and then we also want the icon, so let's say const icon, and we can get that. Remember, the icon's in the header, so I'm going to say group header dot query selector, and we want to grab the I tag. All right, so now that we have all of these elements in our JavaScript, let's first make it so when we click on either the icon or the header, that the icon changes to either a plus or a minus, whatever it's not. So we can easily do that. Let's just say toggle icon. So we can easily do that by taking the icon, and then there's a classless property or classless object that has a method called toggle that will toggle whatever class we put in here. So let's say FA-plus, and then I want to copy that down, and we're going to do FA-minus. So basically, if it's plus already, then we click, it'll turn to minus. If it's minus, it'll turn to plus. So if I come over here, click it, you can see now it's toggling. And even if I click on the header itself, it toggles the icon. All right, so we get that part done. Now let's toggle the visibility of the body, and the way we do that is by adding and removing the open class, right? The first one already has the class hard-coded on it, open. That's why we can see this text. So let's make it so that when we click on one of these headers, that it adds open to the body and shows the body. So let's say toggle visibility of, we'll say visibility of body. And this is pretty simple. We can just take the group body, and we're going to say class list and toggle, and we're going to toggle the class of open. So now if I come right here, the second one, and I click it, now the icon turns to a minus, and I can see the body. If I click it again, it goes away, so I'm toggling it. I can toggle the first one too, even though it starts off with the open class, I can toggle it off. Same thing with any of these. Now, the last thing I want to do here is when I open another body, I want whichever other one is open to close. I don't want to be able to open all of these like this. You can leave it like that if you want, but I'd like to make it so that if this is open and I click this one will close. So there's basically just two things we have to do to any other open body, and that is remove the class of open and also change the icon back to a plus. Now to do that, we're going to have to loop through all of the other groups. So what I'm going to do is let's put a comment here and say close. We'll say close other open FAQ bodies. So let's create a variable called other groups. Set that to the FAQ container, and we're going to use query selector all here. So query selector all is if you want to select something where there's more than one. So in this case, we're selecting all of the class of FAQ-group. And what that gives us is basically an array of all those groups. In fact, I can show you that real quick. If I console log other groups, and we come over here, open the console, click on one of these, you can see it's called a node list, but it's set up like an array. It has indexes, and basically each div with the class of FAQ group is going to be in that node list. So we have that in a variable. Now I want to loop through each one of those, each group. So we can do that by saying other groups dot for each. So for each is a high order array method. It takes in a function. So I'll pass in a function here, and we can pass in right here whatever we want to call each group, which I'll just call it other group. Now we want to loop through and remove the class of open from all the other groups. We also want to change the icon back to a plus. However, we want to make sure we don't do it to the group we're clicking on. We want that one to show. We want to keep that class of open. So what we're going to do is just have a conditional here to make sure that the other group is not equal to the group that we're clicking on. And then what I'm going to do is just create a couple of variables, one for the body of each other group. So other group body, set that to, let's say, other group dot query selector. And we're going to select the class of FAQ dash group dash body. All right, then I also want to get the other icon. So that's going to be FAQ group header and then the I tag. Okay, and I'm just going to change the variable here to other icon. Now, all we have to do is take the other group body and remove the open class. So we can use the class list object and then the remove method. Just like we have toggle, we also have add and remove. So we want to remove the open class from all the other ones. So if I save this and I come over here and I click on this second header, you can see that now not only does this open by adding the class of open, it removes the class of open from any other one. Same thing if I click here, then it's going to close that one. Now the only other problem we have is the icon is staying a minus sign. So we obviously we want to put that back to a plus sign. So what we'll do is we'll take the other icon and we'll say class list dot remove. We want to remove the minus class, so FA dash minus, and we want to add, so I'm going to say class list dot add the plus class. Okay, so now if I come over and I click the second one, this went back to a plus sign and it was hidden, the body was hidden because the open class was removed. Click here, same thing. So now I can only see one at a time, which is what I want. All right, so again, if you don't understand all of this, that's fine. If this is your first time ever seeing JavaScript, I'm sure you're very confused. But again, I have a bunch of content on my channel for learning JavaScript. So the next thing we're going to do is the footer. That's the last part of the last section we're going to do before we move on to the responsiveness and the mobile menu. So the footer just basically has a few different sections here. We have this newsletter card with a little form, and then we have some menus, some links. So let's go back to our index HTML, and we're going to go down past the FAQ. So that section ends right here. Let's add the footer. So I'm going to use a footer tag for this. We'll give it a class of footer, and I'm going to use the BG black class. And we're going to use a regular container for this. And let's use the grid system here as well. So we'll just say footer-grid. And we're just going to have a div. So you could give these a class name if you want, but each div we have is going to be a grid item. So basically we'll have 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4. So the first one is going to have the newsletter. It's also going to have the logo right above it, or the light logo. So in this div here, let's do We'll wrap a link around the logo, send it to index HTML, and then we want an image tag. It's going to be images / and this one's going to be logo white PNG. Okay, and then underneath that logo in the A tag, we're going to have a class of card, because this is going to be the newsletter form. It's going to be in a card. We'll have an H4, we'll say subscribe to newsletter, and then let's have a paragraph, and we're going to use text small here, or text SM, and I'm just going to grab that text real quick. Okay, and then underneath that paragraph we'll have form. We don't need an action, we can get rid of that. And then inside here, let's do an input, and we're going to give it a type of email. Doesn't need a name. Oops. ID, I guess we'll say email. And let's add a placeholder, and we'll say enter your email. Okay, so that's our input. Then we'll have a button underneath. Let's say button. We'll give it a type of submit. And let's say subscribe, and then I'm just going to give this button a class of BTN, BTN primary, and BTN block, because I want it to go all the way across. Okay, and then underneath the div, so the card, I should say, card div, we're going to have just two social media icons. So we'll say I with the class of FAB. When you use these social icons, they have a class of FAB instead of FAS. I'm not sure why. And then we'll do FA-LinkedIn. And then let's also do Twitter. Whoops, Twitter. Okay, let's go back. All right, so it doesn't look very good, but you can see it has all the elements. So we'll finish up the HTML and then we'll style it. So underneath the first div that's in the footer grid, that ends right here. So I'm going to go right under that, and let's add another div, and that's going to have an H4. We'll say company, and then under that we'll have a UL. That'll have some list items with some links that don't go anywhere. We'll say about us, and let's do this one. Second one will say our process, and then we'll do join our team. Okay, so that's the second div. Now after that div wrapping the company links, we're going to have another one that's going to have an H4 of resources. Let's bring that down here. So underneath that we'll have a UL and LI with an A tag. And for this, we're going to say news. Whoops, I didn't want to copy the UL. So the second one, let's say research. This third one is going to be recent projects. Okay, then we're going to have one more div. So after this last one, let's say div. And we'll have an H4 here that'll say contact, and then we'll have a UL, LI, and there's just going to be one link here. It's just going to have the email address of hello@growthapp.com. All right, so if we look, we should have all the HTML. Now we just need to style it. So let's go down in our style sheet under the FAQ above the utility classes, and let's style the footer. So the footer itself, we're going to do some padding on the top and bottom, so 40 pixels, 0. And then let's do the H4s, so footer H4. We're going to do margin bottom, 10 pixels, and then the list items, so footer UL LI. I'm going to set a larger line height, so we're going to do 2.5, spread those out a little bit. Okay, and then for the links, we can't even see those, so let's say footer ULLIA, and say color CCC. Actually, we won't. Let's just do any link in the footer. And then for the icons, so footer icon, let's set the font size. I'm going to make them a little bigger, so 1.5 rem, and then set a margin right of 10 pixels. Okay, so now we just need to align these and use the grid system. So let's go right here and let's say footer grid. And just like we did with the other ones, we're going to say display grid. And then for grid template columns, grid template columns, I don't want them all to be even. I actually want the newsletter to be 2FR, to take up 2 fraction. So let's say for the first one, 2FR, and then for the next 3, we'll do 1FR. All right, so if I save that, now we have them. We have this one taking up more space. Let's add some grid gap, or just gap, 30 pixels. And what else do we want to do here? Let's let justify and align to the center. So justify dash content center align items to the center. Okay, that looks good. Now the card, I want to add some margin to both the top and the bottom. So let's say footer card, and for margin we'll do 20 pixels top, 30 pixels, 30 pixels, 0. And then the last thing is the input here. Obviously doesn't look very good, it's way too small. So let's say footer input, and I'm going to say only the input with the type of email. So type equals email. So we can do this in CSS. And I'm going to set the width to be 100% of its container. I'm going to say padding 10 pixels. We'll add a border of 1 pixel solid light gray. Oops, should be a number sign. Okay, and then let's do a border radius of 5 pixels and a margin of 20 pixels on the top and bottom. And there we go. So that looks pretty good. All right, guys, so that's the desktop version, right? Now what I'm going to do is make this smaller, and you can see that we have some problems. So we have the menu here is squished. This image doesn't look right. This looks okay. These should be stacked. Pricing cards should be stacked. This looks pretty good. The footer, those also need to be stacked. All right, so we're going to start off. Let's see. I guess we'll start off with the hamburger menu. There's not that much JavaScript we really have to do. We do have to add a little bit more HTML for both the hamburger button and for the mobile menu, so HTML and CSS, and then just a little bit of JavaScript. So let's go up to the top, and we're going to go, let's see, we have our navbar, and then we have our main menu. The main menu ends right here, so this is where I want to put our hamburger button. So we're going to say button. Let's give it an ID of hamburger dash button, and also a class of hamburger dash button. Now this is going to have 3 lines. That's why it's called a hamburger menu, because it looks like, you know, 2 buns and the meat or whatever. So let's do 3 classes of hamburger. We'll call it hamburger line. So we'll copy that down 3 times. All right, if I save that, we can't see anything just yet because we're going to use CSS to create it. Now underneath that, we're going to have our mobile menu. So that's going to be a div with the class of mobile-menu. And as far as the links go, it's going to be the same as the main menu. So I'm just going to grab the UL here. and then we'll put that in the mobile menu. So you could have different links if you wanted for the mobile menu. All right, now it looks weird because we have two menus, but we're going to fix that. So let's actually go to our CSS, and at the very bottom, we're going to have some media queries. Okay, so media queries. And if you're not familiar with media queries, it basically allows us to add specific CSS for specific screen sizes or a range of screen sizes. So we're going to have a couple of these actually, and we do this with @media, and then inside parentheses we can say either min width or max width. I'm going to set a max width here of 960 pixels. So what that means is any CSS I put in here is only going to be displayed or it's only going to run if the screen is under 960 pixels. So for instance, if I say body and then I say display none and I save that, you can see that the body isn't showing. If I make this bigger, and as soon as I hit 960 pixels, we see the body, right? So that happens because the CSS only pertains to under 960 pixels. So that's how that works. So we have 960, and then we're also going to have 670, which is basically, you know, larger mobile devices. So max with, let's say 670. I don't know why I keep putting a semicolon there. And then we're going to have one more for smaller mobile devices, let's say 500 pixels. All right, so those are our three media queries. Now, the menu, let me just save this so we can see this again. The main menu, I want that to disappear when we get down to 670. So what we can do is we'll say navbar, and then the main menu, we're going to set that to display none. So if I save, now you can see that the main menu's gone. If I make this bigger, then it shows back up. Now for the mobile menu, we're going to do something a little different. We're not going to display none. We're actually going to set it off to the side because we're going to make it so when we hit the hamburger menu, it comes open from the right. So we're not going to do that just yet. What I do want to do is construct the hamburger button. I'm just going to make that a little smaller. So let's go above the media queries here, and let's say hamburger button. So we have our class of hamburger button. Okay, and we want this to display none by default because we only want it to show on smaller screens. So in the 670 media query, let's go ahead and say navbar and then the class of hamburger button we want to then display as a block, so we want to show it. So let's go into the class here, and we're going to add a bunch of styles. So let's say background none, border none. We want the cursor to be a pointer. We'll say padding 10 pixels, and I'm going to put a z-index on it. And what the z-index does is brings it to we want to bring it to the front. We don't want anything to be over that hamburger button. So I'm going to give it a high z-index. We'll do 1,000. All right. Now we still can't see anything because we need to construct the lines. Remember, we have 3 divs inside the button with the class of hamburger line. So let's do that next. So right here, let's say class hamburger button class hamburger dash line, and we'll set a width of 30 pixels. Let's set a height of 3 pixels, a background of, we'll do 333, margin 6 pixels, or 6 pixels on the top and bottom. And now if we save, we can see our little menu here. So now we want to hide this mobile menu. Okay, but before we hide it, let's style it because I don't want it to look like this when it pops out. So let's go under the hamburger button. Let's say mobile menu, and we'll have the class of mobile dash menu. Okay, and we're going to position this to be fixed. So basically where it is on the page. And we can use our top, you can use top right, bottom left. So I'm going to say from the top, I want it to be 0. And from the right, I want it to start off the page. So we're going to do a negative 300 pixels. So basically what we're saying is from the right, right here, we're going this way. We're going to the right even more because it's a negative number. So we're bringing it off the page 300 pixels. And then the width of it is going to be 250 pixels. The height, I want it to be the entire thing because I want it to be like a bar, like a sidebar. So we're going to do 100% for the height. The z-index, I want it to be on top of all the content except for the hamburger menu, the hamburger button. So let's do 100 for the z-index. The background color, I'm going to do white. If you want to change some of this stuff, you can. And then I'm also going to do a box shadow as well. So box shadow, let's do 0 pixels, 0 pixels, 10 pixels, and then RGBA, black, so 0, 0, 0, with an opacity of 0.2. So just a little bit of a box shadow. And we want it to transition when it comes open. We don't want it to just flicker into the page. We want it to kind of slide. So we're going to transition the right property. Let's say 0.3 seconds. And the effect will be ease-in-out. All right, so if I save it, now you can see it's off the screen. Now it's not going to work yet because we've just set it to be off the screen. We haven't added the functionality where we click the button and the menu opens. But before we do that, let's comment out right because now we'll be able to see it. In fact, we're not going to want to, let's see, we're going to want to set right to 0. So let's say right 0, just so we can see it. This is what it's going to look like when it's open. So basically we just need our JavaScript to make it so when we click the button, it sets the right to 0. All right, when we click it again, then it goes back to 300. That will make it go back and forth. But this doesn't look very good, so I want to style that before we do any of that. All right, so let's say mobile-menu UL, and it does already have some styling from our navbar, right? Because it does have, it's still a UL in the navbar, but I just want to kind of move it down and add a little padding. So on the UL, let's say margin-top 100 pixels, so that'll move it down. Let's say padding right 10 pixels. And let's see, for the LIs, so we'll say mobile menu ULLI. Let's say margin 10 pixels on the top and bottom. And then for the link, so mobile menu, I'm going to make the font size a little bigger. We're going to do 20 pixels. And let's say transition 0.3 seconds. Okay, so now I think that looks a little better. If you want to change some other stuff, you can. Now, like I said, we want the right to go to 0 when it's open. So we're going to have a class called active. So let's say when mobile menu has a class of active, we'll take that right 0 and cut that, and we'll put that down here in the active class, and then we'll uncomment right negative 300 pixels. So now if I were to manually go to the mobile menu and say active, then it opens. If I don't have the class, then it's closed. So now we can just add the JavaScript to open and close it. And if you want to try that on your own, you can do that. It's really not a lot. It's just like 5 lines. So let's come down here and we'll say mobile menu. And I'm going to do the same thing I did above where I add an event listener on the document, add event listener, and listen for the DOM content loaded, and then run a function. And we're going to bring in the hamburger menu or hamburger button. So const hamburger button, let's set that to document dot query selector, and we're going to have the class of hamburger dash button. Actually, you know what? I put an ID on it because I was going to use that, but we don't need the ID. We can get rid of that and just use the class. So we got the hamburger button. Now we need the mobile menu. So let's copy this down and let's change this variable to mobile menu. And we want the class of mobile dash menu. Then all we have to do is on the hamburger button, we want to add a click event listener. So add event listener, and we want to listen for a click. When that happens, we want to run a function, and this is just going to be one line, so we don't even need to use curly braces with an arrow function. We can just simply say we want mobile menu to, on the class list, we want to toggle the active class. Okay, so now if I come over here and I click the hamburger button, the menu opens. If I click it again, it closes. All I'm doing is toggling that active class. Now all we have left is the rest of the site on mobile devices. So as you can see, now that we have the navbar all set, the hero doesn't look very good. So let's go to our style sheet. Let's go down to the media queries. Now the only thing I want in the 960 pixels, which is somewhere right around here, is I just want the XXL text, which is this right here, to be a little smaller. So in that media query, let's say the class of text-XXL, we'll say font size, I believe it's 3 rem by default, so I'm going to set it to 2.5 rem on 960 and smaller. Right, so when we hit 960, which is right here, it gets a little smaller. So that's all I'm going to do for that. 670 is where the majority of our stuff is going to go, because that's where we start to get to, smaller mobile screens. So staying with the hero, let's change the image, right? We don't want this long image. That doesn't really make sense. It doesn't look good there. So I have a mobile image that we can use. So let's say hero, and remember it's on the container. So we're going to set the background to URL, and that's going to be, let's see, .. right? Yeah, we're in the CSS folder, so we want to go up one level into images, and then hero-bg. I think I called it hero-bg mobile PNG, I think. And we'll say no repeat. Yeah, so you can see it's a different image now. So as far as the size, let's do background size, and I'm going to set it to 350 pixels. And normally this takes a little bit of experimentation, so I had to, try a couple things, try different values. This is ultimately what I found worked the best. So we'll set it to that size, and then the position, so background position, I want to set it to the bottom. Okay, so that'll put it down to the bottom there. And then the height of the container, I want to make that bigger because right now everything doesn't fit. So let's make that 770 pixels. All right, and I'm going to change some of this stuff up too as well. But that takes care of our image. So basically, as soon as we hit 670, which is right here, it goes to the small image. So let's see, the hero content, which is basically, all the content in the hero, we're going to set the width to 100%. So let's say hero, and then hero content. We'll set that width to 100%. Okay, so that kind of, gives us some space right here. And I want everything to be aligned centered. So text align center, like that. And let's see, the hero text right here, I think that's at 70% right now. So let's say hero, and then we want the hero text. So that width should also be 100%. Actually, we could just take this and put it here, just put a comma, put that there, and then we don't need that. Now I think that looks pretty good, but we could stack the buttons on top of each other. I think that's how it is in the Figma file. So if we look at that, yeah, right here on the responsive versions, the buttons are on top of each other. So we'll go ahead and do that. So right here in the 670, let's say hero, and then there's a class called hero buttons, and then we'll grab both of them, which have the class of BTN, and we'll add some margin bottom, and we want to display, instead of inline block, we're going to say display block, and we're going to set the width to 100%, and then if I save that, now they're on top of each other. Okay, now we do want some, what did I do? Margin bottom nothing. Let's do margin bottom 10 pixels. Okay, so that'll break it up a little bit. Okay, cool. So the video area I think is fine. Aside from the text, maybe we should make that a little smaller. So for the text classes, let's come into the 670 media query and just say text. And for the class of text-XL, which I believe is what that is, let's set the font size to 1.9 rem. Yeah, so that makes that a little smaller. And then we'll add the other ones as well. So we have text LG. So on mobile screens, we'll set the font size for that to 1.5 rem. And then let's do for the medium, so text MD, we'll set the font size to 1.1 rem. Okay, so the video part is all set. Now for the testimonials, let's see, for the heading, what do we have it set to? I think we have it set to a width of like 700 pixels or something. So if we come up here and we look at testimonials, where is it? We've written a lot of CSS. Testimonials heading, yeah, width is 700 pixels. So I'm going to change that to be a width of 100% so that it doesn't break out of the screen here. So back down to the 670 media query. Let's go right above the text here. And let's say testimonials, and then testimonials dash heading, and let's set a width, or we'll set a max width to 100%, and we should probably center it as well. So text align center, yeah. So next we have the cards here, which we want to stack. Also, there's a horizontal scroll bar here, which we'll get rid of once we align everything, but I don't ever want to have a horizontal scroll there. So what we can do is on the body, we can say overflow-x, which is the horizontal axis. We'll set that to hidden, so that way there's no horizontal scroll no matter what. All right, then we'll come back down to our media query, 670. And let's go right here. Let's say testimonials, and then testimonials dash grid. And all we're going to do is set the grid template columns, which initially was set to 1FR 3 times. Now we're just going to set it to simply 1FR, so one single column. So if I save, now they're all stacked in one column. So I think that's really all we need there. If we come down to pricing, we want to do the same thing. We want these to stack. So instead of creating a whole nother selector, let's just add it on to this. So we have our pricing dash grid, I believe that's what I called it, and now that stacks. So the grid is easy to make responsive. We're going to using it in this way. So let's see, what else do we have here? FAQ, I mean, we can just leave that. I think that's fine. And then the footer, let's see, we have the same issue with the grid, so we can just actually add that here because we're doing the same thing to all of these. We could even have a special class for the grid instead of having these three, but I mean, you guys can look into that more on your own. So let's say, what is it, footer? I think it's called footer grid. Let's just put the footer class before it just to stay consistent. Okay, there we go. Now I also want to see how we have the margin right on the newsletter. I want that to go all the way, so we want to remove that margin. So let's add here footer, and again, make sure you're in the media query 670. So the footer card, we're going to set the margin right to 0. So now it goes all the way across. And then I want to align everything here into the middle. So let's say in the footer and footer dash grid, the direct div, so basically the parent divs inside the grid, I want to align to the center. So text align to the center. Okay, so that looks pretty good. And then let's see what else. We have our text. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I mean, for the large text like the XXL on 500 pixels, smaller screens, I do want to make that a little bit smaller. So we'll say font size. We'll do 2 rem for that. Okay, so up here. Yeah, and we can check it out with the device toolbar. So if we open up our DevTools, click on that. Now, if you see a big space on the right here, I don't know why it does that sometime in Chrome. You can click this button to make it go horizontal, which looks pretty good. But then click it again, and that space should go away. So, yeah, I mean, that looks pretty good. I'd say it looks pretty similar to the Figma file here. All right, cool. I think we're done. Yeah, I think we're good. So, and again, if you want to add inner pages, you guys can do that. You have the main layout now. You should understand, we went through a lot in this video. Now, the last thing we're going to do is deploy this project, and we're going to use Netlify. So if we go to netlify.com, they have an extremely generous free package, so we don't have to put any credit card information or anything like that. All you have to do is sign up, and you just sign up with GitHub. It just logs me in because I'm already signed up. And basically you need to push your project to GitHub first, and then you can go ahead and add new site and you can import it. And it's very, very simple. So let's go to GitHub before we do anything. And we're going to create a new repo. If you don't have a GitHub account, make sure you create one. If you're doing any kind of web development or any kind of programming at all, you should have a GitHub account. So let's go to, we want to go to right here, new repository, and I'm going to call this SaaS, S-A-A-S dash landing dash page. And I'll say simple landing page for a SaaS. And I'm going to make it private just for now, but it'll be public by the time the video is released. So all we have to do, you have to make sure you have Git installed, which is a version control system. If you don't, you can go to git-scm.com. You can download it here, or if you're on Mac, you can install it with Homebrew. A lot of different ways to get Git set up. And then we have to just run a few commands. So I'm going to go to my project and close these files out. And there's just a couple things I want to add here. Well, actually, I already have the screenshot because I'm using that in my README file, because I do want to have a README for you guys in the main project page. You don't have to do this, but I'm gonna, so I'm just gonna create a new file here called readme.md. It's a markdown file, and I'm just gonna grab the content from the current one I have. So basically just tells you, you know, what this is and gives you a screenshot to preview this. So it just looks like that. All right, and again, you don't have to add that. So now we need to open up a terminal. You could do it from VS Code. You could do it, you know, there's source control built in, but if you're not using VS Code, just in case, I'm going to just do it from the terminal. It's really, really simple if you guys haven't used Git before. So first thing you want to do is just initialize a repository. We can do that with git init. So what that does is it creates a repository. It's actually a hidden folder called .git. And then we need to add our project files. So I'm going to say git add all. So just use a dot. That means we're adding all the files to basically to a staging area. Then we want to commit the files to the repository. So we can say git commit -m and then some kind of comment. Usually on your first commit, you can say just initial commit. Hit enter. Now everything is in our local repository. Now we want to push it to GitHub. So if we look over here, we've already done this stuff. So now right here it says or push an existing repository. That's what we want. So we're going to grab this. Yours will be a different URL. So make sure you copy your own. And basically we're just adding this GitHub project as our remote repository. So I'm going to paste that in. Okay, then we want to make sure we're using the main branch. So I'll grab that, paste that in, and then finally we're going to push to the main branch. So I'll grab that. All right, so now if I come back over here and reload, now I have my project on GitHub. So now that that's done, we can go back to Netlify and say add new site. Import an existing project. I'm going to deploy with GitHub. It's going to open up another window, and I'm going to search for what I call it, SaaS landing page. So right here, I'm going to click on that. There's no special settings. We don't have any special directories or anything or commands, so we don't need to do anything here. Just click on deploy SaaS landing page. So it says site deploy in progress. It shouldn't take long at all since it's a very, very small site. There we go. So you'll have a URL here. It'll be something different than this, but just click on that and now your project is live. Okay, obviously if this were a production project, you wouldn't want to use this kind of domain, this netlify.app domain. So what you would do next is just click on this setup custom domain and just go through the steps, set up a SSL certificate, and I mean, you're all set. All right, so that's pretty much it. So remember to check out I Code This. So tons of challenges here, really cool stuff. And like you can see right here, pricing grid. So this is something that obviously is much more simple than what we just did. So if you're a beginner and you're trying to learn HTML, CSS, it's a great site to get some cool projects. And of course, you can submit them as well. You can check out other submissions. So right here, view all submissions. And you can check out everyone's code. So this is the in-browser editor that I was talking about in the beginning. So it has the HTML, the CSS, and the JavaScript. So pretty cool. All right, guys, so that's it. I will see you in the next video.